fingerprint. Like,
I don't care.
Fingerprint. You're not smart enough.
My theory is I can't. Well, then you. So then you then download and annotate.
Oh yeah.
It is. It started. We all felt that chill and went, oh! And I know. I got to pull up. Okay. Follow my son around as he was trick-or-treating. My son is overly polite though. All pleases and thank yous and just like the most polite trick-or-treater you ever did see. What's that?
My friends and I would walk past
No great pumpkin carols? So you're doing your best. This is the first time you've seen this one. C's a little bit tough. The way that I interpreted it is another example besides the one they're giving you, and why. That's kind of how I determined it. That's kind of what I decided. That's a response because they called each of those three a response. So another critical response would be another thing like them. Yeah, you're coming up with your own and explaining it. That's kind of how I was reading it.
Bless you. Oh no.
Your answer is very brief. Each one, just get quick to the point. Quick to the point. Short answer. It is not, they're not mini essays. Short answer. Basically, the timing would be about 5 minutes for each of the things. That's a question. Answer the question directly. Yeah, you get about 5 minutes. Do 4 or 5 of them. And instead of the essay, you're getting like 4 or 5 of these. Easy. Yes. Quick to the point. Briefly explain. It's exactly why. Tell me exactly why you did what you did. Yes, we are. Yes. Someone did you up for that? Maybe this has something. Okay. So your answer is very, very direct, very, very quick response, okay? Just get to exactly what you're trying to talk about. You don't need introductions, you don't need anything, you just go, questions asking, you go, this cuts, right? That cuts. You done all 3 parts? Are you done all 3 parts?
Alright, I'm gonna do.
Yeah, let's look at that and see.
I don't know what is it.
So, my guess is that it's about trying to give me another example and another response to that change because of the person, or because of the change of slip up. What was one example? Response. Kind of cross out the word critical.
Yeah, that's what
Take out the word critical. But I think the reason that critical's in there is because it's against critical, as opposed to future recording. Okay, so let's not kill this thing by going on for too long. So this is your first introduction to what is going to be a core component to the new AP exam. One of the things that they wanted to do to make it more like a college course is that college professors love what they call IDs. They love you to just be able to know, to be able to explain particular facts very briefly on point. Not big shovels full of information, in the essays where you guys just dump all your stuff in and hope that somehow or another the right answer could be found in there somewhere. Instead, it's like, here's the question, answer it, and that's it. And so these are each going to be worth, there's going to be 4 or 5 of them, okay? Each of them, each question worth 3 points, and basically you get a point for A, a point for B, a point for C. And all of them are going, and there's going to be no halvesies, no is. It's either you do or you don't. Does that make sense? So the way that when the examples of the ones that I saw on the practice exam, a lot of them were kind of like this, where 1 and 2 were fairly easy, or pardon me, A and B were fairly easy, followed by a C that took you, and you kind of cringed a little bit, and you just had to do the best that you possibly could. Turned out that the phraseology always seemed kind of weird, but your answer was usually okay, as long as you kind of knew what you were talking about as far as the subject was concerned. So the other thing, like particularly on this question, though I could make a judgment myself and say which of these 3 things was the most or least, it's not about what I think. It's not about what the grader thinks. It's about how well you defend what it is that you say. So if you give a factual backup to why you chose what you chose, and your facts are spot on, you get it right. Does that make sense? So so who would like to, the A and B are fairly intertwined. So would someone like to try to tell me their A and B on this? Which one was the most, and which was the one that you wouldn't have chosen? Do I have to play random guy again? Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I didn't finish writing it, but the creation of the Underground Railroad demonstrates strong resistance in the North to slavery and the expansion of the slaveocracy, which means those that support the railroad would oppose the Fugitive Slave Act. But the fact that the Underground Railroad was secretive shows that shows that there was still other Northerners that were still supported slavery.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Okay, so it sounds like you were kind of arguing against yourself here. So
I'm showing that there's varied reactions.
Okay, I like that. I like that. But which one was the most? Which one was the most one? It is. So basically, it says briefly explain why one of the following best supports the enforcement of the new fugitive slave law. And you said that it would be the creation of the Underground Railroad? Okay. So which one would then be the one you didn't choose? If you didn't get there.
I guess
Okay. So you basically were saying that since it was strong but varied, that it was strong because you did the Underground Railroad, but varied because it was secretive. Got it. Okay. So and then the formation of the Republican Party because it was less of a what? Just okay. No, you got to start it. So Chris, what do you think?
I said that the strongest would have been the formation of the Republican Party because it was a really organized and public anti-slavery movement kind of, and it was kind of a big deal because it showed a majority or a lot of people were anti-slavery in the North,
Right.
And that was I don't know.
And did you do the B part too, which was the least?
Yeah, I said that the Underground Railroad because it was kind of it wasn't really organized. It was kind of just people that knew other people, and it wasn't really public. People just if you were in it, you knew it, and otherwise you really didn't.
Okay. So no, yours were opposite, but that doesn't mean that one's right and one's wrong. So long as you put in a solid core defense. Now the second part I might look for a little bit more evidence
Yeah.
for the not part, okay, for the not part. But your yes part was very, very strong. Did you have one as well?
Yeah, I mean, I have the same points as Chris.
Mm-hmm. And
For the Republican Party, I kind of said that it was the strongest because, you know, they were able to organize the whole political party based, like, with all these contrasting views, because you said, like, that was a big part of it, that all of them didn't agree on everything, but they had a strong enough, opposement of slavery that they formed an entire party, so I think that's pretty strong.
okay, and then could you come up with a strong as to why not the Underground Railroad then, or?
I said that the Underground Railroad wasn't so much a reaction to the fugitive slave law, and that it was kind of just like a long-standing thing that kind of came because to free slaves.
Okay, so that the part that I liked in your answer was long-standing. It pre-existed.
Yeah.
It pre-existed the fugitive slave law, so that would be a strong thing. So you weren't really reacting to it if you already existed, right? So contextualization, if you can put something into context, you put things into time, that's going to be golden. Because if you make part of your argument, it existed already before we even had the fugitive slave law. That's a very, very powerful argument. Does that make sense? So context, time, are going to be very, very powerful here. And then critical response. These are the types of words they use. Critical, I think it means against. So if you're looking for one critical response, okay, what would be another critical response to what was happening in this period? What could you say? And it could be a critical response, could be from different groups, but they were responding critically to something here. What would be an example of something that happened as a response to the fugitive slave law? Yeah.
Well, I said that basically what happened in response to the fugitive slave law was that the North and the South sort of reversed roles in their sort of opinions about executive power and federal power. And I said that this created or increased sectionalism and led to them sort of just the Whigs just separated into like conscience Whigs and then Southern Whigs, and it created such conflict that in the election of 1852, they basically died, and yeah.
Okay, so the fact that you used that exact example, bingo. So so the first part, there was split, there was response. You hadn't quite used a actual fact currency, but as soon as you went to the fact election and this happened, I think bingo, you would get that point. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So the way that I think of these things are making sure you use some sort of proper noun term in your example. Some sort of actual currency, not just an explanation, but something that is an is thing. Something that you would call fact. Okay? And you use that fact, you defend it, you get that point. It is kind of how I see this, that third point. And the third one's always going to be the most vague of them. The third one's going to be the one you're going to have to work the hardest on. Okay, and I believe they purposely do it. I think they're going 1, 2, and 3. If you're, it's easy to come up with that first one, a little harder to come up with that second one, but that third one kind of stumps some of you. And I think they are doing that on purpose. That is going to be one of our things. You get that point, you don't get that point. Izzy, did you?
Oh no, so I was just going to clarify that you would it's better to have one specific event. Okay.
Yes. You want to, because remember, this is not a whole essay. It is short answer. So you basically dump your thing, defend your thing, move on. Okay? Continually explaining it is doing you nothing. And maybe actually hurting you because of timing that you wanted to get onto the other questions. Does that make sense? And so, so it's make your point, dig in, get your point in, defend it, move on. All right, so this is our first one, okay? Do we need to do breathing exercises, or are we okay? Okay. Now this is one type. The other type is going to be, they're going to give you a little passage or something like that, and then ask the three, A, B, and C, to a passage or a chart or something like that. Okay? All right.
What was her response being critical?
So the fact that that the division of the party was based on, let me see if I'm getting this right, that people were opposed to the Fugitive Slave Act, and that led to the fact that since they were critical of the Fugitive Slave Act, it led to the split of the party. To me, it has enough of a fact of why it's basically leading to what are they calling, a response to the changes in the period. Does that make sense? So did you have another one that you were thinking of, or?
No, I'm just kind of confused with these aspects.
Yeah, so the answer I came up with was personal liberty laws. That personal liberty laws would have been a absolute critical response to the Slave Act. That a northern state was basically going to say, this doesn't apply to us, we are granting people personal liberty. And that to me would be a hardcore actual response. That one I thought was close enough, given kind of the ambiguity of the question, that I would take. Does that make sense? All right. All right, we okay? Okay, everybody taking a big breath. Exhale. All right, so I'm gonna, we're probably gonna do at least one of these a week from now on to try and get ourselves acquainted with the style. And so when you have these, you need to come in and just start right off and working on it. Got it? All right, so we're going to finally finish chapter 13 and move on to chapter 14 today. I gave you for homework the term review. And one of the reasons for the term review is, given that in these short answers they want you to know actual hardcore termy things, knowing these words, being able to use these words, is going to be hugely important. Okay? So just do the multiple choice, bring it for next time, and we'll make sure that we're kind of in understanding these major terms from chapter 13. Okay. Questions, comments, concerns? Ladies and gentlemen, Abraham Lincoln. Now, Abraham Lincoln, we had met just very briefly during the war with Mexico. Abraham Lincoln was elected to Congress in 1846, started serving in 1847. And he wanted President Polk to demonstrate what spot of American soil American blood had been spilled. Polk had said that was the reason why we were going to war, American blood spilled on American soil. Abraham Lincoln wanted Polk to show that this was disputed soil. He was basically bringing into question the cause of war. This made Abraham Lincoln a war protester. It will earn him a derisive nickname, Spotty Lincoln. It won't earn him another term in Congress. One of the reasons he does not win again in Congress in the election of 1848 is because he was against the war. This event will lead to Abraham Lincoln leaving politics and going back to his what was his other career, a lawyer. But in 1854, his home state senator, Stephen Douglas, pushed through Congress the Kansas-Nebraska Act. And this law is going to motivate Abraham Lincoln to get back into politics. You see, Abraham Lincoln was anti-slavery. We have all sorts of evidence of this from very early on. He had made a trip down the Mississippi River and he'd seen people on the banks in chains. And he wrote about seeing this to his friend Joshua Speed, a letter about how troubling he found this. And when Stephen Douglas basically pushes through a law which basically breaks a promise. Promise had been that there would be no slavery north of 3630 in the Louisiana Territory. Forever. And forever turned out to be 34 years. Abraham Lincoln would be among many who will be upset by this. And for Abraham Lincoln, he comes back into politics with this kind of as his mission. In 1855, he's going to run for Senate. Now, this is not his famous run for Senate. His famous run for Senate happens in 1858. But I look to his 1855 run as the thing that really truly shows us kind of who Abraham Lincoln is. You see, in 1855, we've seen kind of the death of the Whig Party. We see the very beginnings of the Republican Party. But as the Republican Party is first starting to form, it has some Democrats that are kind of thinking and kind of not thinking. It has former Whigs kind of thinking and not thinking. It hadn't truly gelled yet. Well, Abraham Lincoln saw something in the Illinois State Senate in 1855. He saw that there was a majority of people there who had voiced opposition to the Kansas-Nebraska Act. And he saw that this was perhaps an opportunity to elect to the United States Senate somebody who was against this. Somebody who would vote this type of law down. Someone like him. And so he holds a meeting, and his estimates showed that there were 52 people in the state senate that were against the Kansas-Nebraska Act. And he manages to get somewhere like 45 or so of them together in a meeting before the election. And basically, these people kind of pledge that they would vote for him for Senate. And he needed 6 more votes. He needed 51 votes to become the senator. But he noticed something. 5 anti-slavery Democrats had not showed up at his meeting. Kind of figured out that they were the margin. And as they hold the Senate meeting, when they hold the election, Lincoln gets 45 votes, 46 votes, 47 votes. Turned out that those 5 anti-slavery Democrats were voting in favor of another Democrat by the name of Lyman Trumbull. They would not vote for Lincoln. The rest of the Democrats were supporting a pro-Kansas-Nebraska Act guy. But they were about to shift their vote to the governor of the state, whose view on Kansas-Nebraska was kind of vague. Not so much against it, for it, we're not sure. And Abraham Lincoln worried that this was who was going to get to the Senate, not somebody who was dedicated against the act. So he tells his supporters, the 47, to support the anti-slavery Democrat. Basically giving his 47 votes to the guy who had 5. His floor leader, the guy who had gotten him the 47 votes, basically said that's idiotic. That you don't do it. You don't give 47 does not give their votes to 5. But Abraham Lincoln says it's more important for me to get somebody who is anti-slavery, anti-Kansas-Nebraska Act into the Senate than that person be me. The anti-slavery Democrat, Lyman Trumbull, is elected. Lincoln goes to his victory party, wishes him hearty congratulations. He showed such grace in losing. Later, when he is running for president, those 5, they turn out to be Lincoln men. And they will be the people who lead his campaign for the presidency. In the years that follow, Lincoln will emerge as one of the foremost orators for the Republican Party. He's going to say some of the same stuff that William Seward had said. But he says it in a different way. William Seward said, irrepressible conflict. Abraham Lincoln says, a house divided against itself cannot stand. It has to become all one or all the other. In other words, what is that? Probably an irrepressible conflict. But the way that Lincoln explained it, people felt like, oh, he's making a good point here. Whereas Seward seemed like he was just taking a side and there was no moving him off of it. Abraham Lincoln spoke in a way that people had a tendency to kind of feel he got it. Lincoln also is going to tell us that he is worried about the precedents that could come out of the Dred Scott case. He believed that even though Dred Scott applied only to territories, could the United States Supreme Court eventually apply the same idea to states? Maybe. Going back to a house divided against itself cannot stand. It will have to become all one way or all the other. All free, all slave. Dred Scott could be the way of making it all slave. And this is the Abraham Lincoln who was talking at the time. He was not the guy with the beard. He does not grow that beard until he is elected president. So this lanky guy from Springfield was the one who would be making those arguments. That he received a letter from a little girl who said that he would look more distinguished with a beard, and he grew. Anyway, in 1858, Lincoln tries for the Senate again. This is the famous run. In 1858, the parties are a little bit more solid. It's not just kind of a coalition that had existed back in 1855. In order for Lincoln to win in Illinois in 1858, the state legislature would have to fall to the Republicans. It was currently in the hands of the Democrats. There would have to be a shift. To make this shift happen, he is going to challenge Douglas not only for that Senate seat, but to a series of debates. These are known as the Lincoln-Douglas debates. Some people get confused. They think that they happened when the two were running for president. They do not. They happen when the two are running for Senate. Now, Douglas probably didn't have to do these debates. The Democrats controlled the state legislature. It was not. It was a fairly safe seat. But Douglas realizes that he needs to do something to better his national image. You see, Douglas had made Southern Democrats angry with him when he came out against Kansas coming in as a slave state, claiming that popular sovereignty had not happened. He wants to run for president, and in order to run for president, he needs the help of the South. And what better way to gain back respect in the South than to beat up on one of the known Republican voices? That if he can crush Lincoln, maybe the South will like him again. Well, in the debates, Douglas, the Democrat Douglas, is going to argue that if we continue to argue over slavery in America, it could make America forfeit its destiny. What Douglas is arguing here is American exceptionalism, that we have a mission, we were here for a reason. This is this amazing thing America is. But if we argue about slavery, we may not get there. So just go with my popular sovereignty idea, done, over, we're all good. Lincoln argues that if we don't do something about slavery, we could forfeit our liberty. And what sort of destiny do we have if we've given up our liberty? Now, Douglas is going to fire back. He is going to try and make Lincoln defend. Okay, you're so much into liberty, you're so much into freedom. Well, does that mean that if you were to give freedom to African Americans, does that mean that they would be equitable? Would they be equal with whites? Well, Lincoln, in a state that is largely populated by Southerners who moved north, could he get away with equity and be elected? So basically what Douglas does here is he makes Lincoln kind of do the political dance. He never really answers this question. But Lincoln will put in the last final shot. The shot was so famous, that we call it the Freeport Doctrine. It was basically a question that Abraham Lincoln will ask Douglas in Freeport, Illinois, where he basically forces Douglas to choose which is more important, which is the more important thing in American politics, in American law. Is it Douglas's great idea of popular sovereignty, or is it the Dred Scott decision? And first of all, you need to think, you have to remember something here. For the South, they really liked popular sovereignty. But when the Dred Scott decision was made, what did it do with the argument over slavery? Dred Scott, what control, what power does the federal government have about extending slavery into the territories? What is the role of the federal government via Dred Scott? 0. Dred Scott basically allowed states, did not allow the federal government any sort of role in determining slavery or freedom. Popular sovereignty still makes it a question. With popular sovereignty, the federal government says, yeah, you get to vote on it. Dred Scott says, the federal government can say nothing. The federal government can't prevent anybody from carrying their property into a state. The federal government is out of the equation. So if you're the South, which one do you prefer? Dred Scott or popular sovereignty? Which one does Douglas have to choose, given his idea in the Kansas-Nebraska Act? It's the reason why he believed that Kansas should not have come in as a slave state. Which one is his thing? So he chooses his thing. Yeah.
When he came up with the Nebraska-Kansas Act, was he the senator?
Yes. So he is the incumbent right now.
Okay.
So he is running as the incumbent. This is Lincoln trying to oust him.
Okay.
The Democrats controlled the legislature. It would take the Republicans taking control of the legislature. The weight, the heavy weight here is on Lincoln here. Douglas is mainly debating to better his reputation in the South because he wants to become president.
Okay.
What did he just do with his shot at being president if the South prefers Dred Scott and he says that that popular sovereignty is better? What did he just do to it? It's gone. And so, in the end, Douglas wins the seat. It would have meant a change for Lincoln to have won. But Lincoln is going to gain a huge reputation in Republican circles because of the fact that he had so much kind of tagged Douglas and made him almost impossible as far as becoming the Democratic candidate for president. Meanwhile, the Republicans in 1858 are also going to gain control of the House of Representatives. So in other words, this party, which was nowhere in 1854, controls the House of Representatives in 1858. Things have changed. And if you had, which means, just in case you're not getting this, the House of Representatives is in control of the people who believe that slavery should not be extended into the territories. 1858 gives away to 1859. And in 1859, ladies and gentlemen, let me reintroduce to you John Brown. Now, you might remember John Brown. He was the guy who, in Kansas, had attacked this little town called Pottawatomie Creek, had killed 5 pro-slavery guys, and hacked their bodies up into little pieces. Okay? This was one of the things that causes Bleeding Kansas, the Civil War in Kansas. Well, by 1859, things have calmed down a wee bit in Kansas. And John Brown is looking for a kind of another opportunity to kind of change things in America.
He wasn't arrested or tried?
In Kansas, since it was such a bloody civil war, everybody's killing everybody. They didn't go off and arrest anybody, really. It was a civil war, if that makes sense. Anyway, John Brown manages to get hold of supporters that had some cash, okay? They call these people the Secret Six. And what these people are going to do is they're going to help finance John Brown leading a slave rebellion. The idea was this. John Brown was going to raid an armory in Harper's Ferry. Okay? He shows up in Harper's Ferry, Virginia, with wagon loads of axes and pikes and other weapons. He would then seize control over the federal armory. What do you have in the armory? What do you have in the arsenal? Guns. And the idea would be is that the slaves in this area of Virginia would show up, he would hand out pikes and guns and axes, and what would you have? The mother of all slave rebellions. That was the idea. But what happens at Harper's Ferry? What if you threw a slave rebellion and nobody came? Apparently somebody forgot to tell the slaves. And basically what you have is John Brown in control of all these weapons, these pikes, these axes, and basically sitting there. When he had arrived in Harper's Ferry, there was a train that was at the station, and he held up the train, basically held it hostage. And so here he is in control of the armory, in control of all these weapons, holding a train hostage. I know. John Brown decides to let the train go. Now, obviously, what is the train doing?
It's going to go tell someone.
It's going to go tell someone. And so who shows up? Not slaves, not a rebellion, but Robert E. Lee and the United States Marine Corps. And they put down his little thing. John Brown is then captured and put to death. He had killed several people on taking control of this armory. And then something kind of, it's almost magical what happens with Brown. He becomes a martyr. When he was put to death, church bells throughout all of New England ring. They're going to start writing songs about him. John Brown's a body lies a molten in a grave. Henry David Thoreau will say, he was a saint awaiting his martyrdom. Basically, what has happened is that John Brown became symbolic of the anti-slavery movement. Yeah?
Just a question about his plan. Did they actually have a plan to alert the slaves, or did they realize afterwards that they didn't really think it through?
I think it's the second, unless. And there is a theory that he intended to fail the whole time.
Become a mother?
Yeah. This is theory. But basically the idea is that most moderates think that some guy running off and starting a slave rebellion is nuts. Right? And think about what would happen if there had been a slave rebellion, if a whole bunch of whites in the South were killed by this slave rebellion. What might it do as far as Northern attitudes? Think about it. Would Northerners all start going, oh goody? Or would there very likely be sympathy for the poor Southerners who were killed? And so a lot of people believe that, in effect, success would have been failure. That had they actually made this rebellion happen, it would have turned people against the cause of being anti-slavery. But by failing and becoming a martyr, it strengthened it. Southerners come to believe that the North is full of a whole bunch of brown-loving Republicans. They want to kill us. They want us to die. Those Northerners, they don't love us anymore. The North. Success would have been failure. Failure becomes success. So now, everybody kind of thinking north-south. Can you kind of see how things are dividing up? It is now 1860. And in 1860, we have a presidential election. And in this presidential election, remember how I said that the political parties of the United States, that they kind of got along by avoiding the issue of slavery. But in 1852, that became impossible for the Whig Party. And so pretty much what happens in 1852, the result of that election is the death of the Whigs. Well, in 1860, the same thing is going to happen to the Democrats. In 1860, the Democratic Party will split. Stephen Douglas is going to attempt to become the candidate with his stand of popular sovereignty, slavery in the territories, let's vote on it. Northern Democrats support this idea. Northern Democrats start saying, we are with you, Stephen Douglas. And delegate after delegate from northern states in the Democratic Convention start saying they support Stephen Douglas. Southerners are going, wait. This guy, no, it's Dred Scott. Doesn't he get it? Where's the doughface? We need somebody who's going to pledge their ever-loving thing for the South, do what we want, just like Pierce or Buchanan. Why is everybody liking this guy? We don't like him. New York votes in favor of Douglas. Ohio votes in favor of Douglas. And Southerners go, well, wait a minute. If you want this guy, we don't want you. Bless you. And Southerners walk out of the Democratic Convention. They bring the Democratic Convention to a close. They bring it out again. And the Democrats and the Southern Democrats don't even show up. So the Northerners will simply nominate Stephen Douglas without any Southern support. The Southerners will then hold a convention of their own, and they will nominate the sitting Vice President of the United States, John C. Breckinridge. We no longer have a national Democratic Party. We have either one party, two candidates, North and South, or two distinct parties. We certainly have two different views on slavery. Stephen Douglas believes in popular sovereignty. The fact that he voted against the pro-slavery Constitution being the Constitution of Kansas and allowing Kansas in as a slave state, and the fact that he believed that that popular sovereignty outweighed the Dred Scott decision made him unacceptable to the South. The Southern Democrats support John C. Breckinridge, who basically says that the federal government has no say in the matter. John C. Breckinridge says that the federal government can do nothing to stop the extension of slavery into the territories. It's all slavery all the time, the slavery channel. Nothing the federal government can do. One party, two candidates, two different visions. This was extraordinarily scary. People figure this out, that we've lost the one big thing that kind of connected North and South. And so, in response to the Democratic Party splitting, a new party is born. Its name says everything. They are the Constitutional Union Party. They are made up of middle-of-the-road unionists. They basically, their stand on slavery is la 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 la. Don't say that word. Okay? We believe in one thing. We believe in one thing only. We believe in this. We believe in the Constitution of the United States. That is right. We are the Constitutional Union Party. We are for the Constitution and the fact that it keeps us together as a union. We are the Constitutional Union Party. Enough said. You don't need to know anything else. Constitution, Union, Union, Constitution. Okay? Keep the union together for the kids. They nominate perhaps the perfect named guy for their party. Okay? They are the Constitutional Union Party. They nominate John, I shall call him Liberty Bell. Okay? John Liberty Bell. Okay? Constitution Union Bell, okay? Liberty Bell. Keep us together. The union. For the kids. So now, so far, if you're keeping track, we've got in this one election, we've got two Democratic candidates. One who says slavery, vote on it. The other who says slavery, nothing the union can do, nothing the government can do about it. All slavery, all the time, slavery channel. We have the other candidate who says slavery, what? La 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 la. Don't say that near me. Okay? Finally, you have the Republicans. Now, in 1860, it turns out having friends is good. Because one of the guys who had been there back in 1855, okay, voting against Lincoln in 1855, but seeing Lincoln and how he how he handled it in 1855. Well, in 1860, he's a Lincoln guy. And he was one of the people who was part of the group that decided where the Republican convention would be in 1860. Chicago, Illinois. This guy and the other Lincoln men before the convention went out and found Illinois Republicans in Chicago, and they would hand out free tickets to the Republican convention. And basically, what would these people do during the convention anytime Abraham Lincoln's name was said? Home field advantage. Now, at first, it did not seem like Abraham Lincoln had a shot. All talk from anybody who had any sort of opinion on the matter said that William Seward was going to be the candidate for the Republican Party. William Seward had been in the Senate for a long time. William Seward was one of the foremost speakers on the issue of slavery in America. William Seward, they said, on the first ballot. William Seward. So much so that in William Seward's home state, in his home city, they had brought out the cannon, the town cannon, out to the main square. They had loaded them all up. They had banners all written, "Congratulations, Seward." They had it all set up that as soon as they received the cable that Seward was the candidate, the banners would unfurl, the cannons would fire, everybody would celebrate William Seward's candidacy. But in the first ballot, Seward does not get enough votes. He got the most, but he didn't get a majority. You see, Seward had a problem. People thought he was too radical. People kept thinking, higher law. Okay, does this sound like somebody who can compromise? Irrepressible conflict. If he becomes president, what does he think is about to happen? Civil war. Do we want this guy? And so when Seward doesn't get the nomination, all of a sudden people start shopping for other candidates. The one other high-profile guy was a guy by the name of Salmon. My mom obviously doesn't love me because he named me Salmon Chase. Salmon Chase was perhaps the most abolitionist of all of these candidates. His flaw is that he was a backstabber. He had a tendency to do whatever it took to win, including one time when the Democrats took control of the Ohio Senate right before his turn to be reelected. Well, he went over to the anti-slavery Democrats and said, "I'll be a Democrat if you guys vote with the Republicans and put me in." Well, the Republicans, though happy he won, were unhappy at the fact that now he's calling himself a Democrat. And so they doubted his loyalty. So when it came time to make a decision, many of the Ohio delegation will come looking for another candidate. The third guy was a guy by the name of Edward Bates. He was a former Democrat from Missouri, regarded to be the most moderate of all the candidates. But he's from a slave state. And his stand against slavery was maybe sort of suspect. Well, Lincoln's guys on the floor start touting that Abraham Lincoln is a stronger candidate. He's got fewer enemies. He's got this egalitarian image. He is attractive to workers and farmers. He's your guy. And when his name is out there, and the crowds in the Chicago, Illinois forum were saying, every time they heard his name, the Ohio delegation flips its vote from their native son, Salmon Chase, to Abraham Lincoln. It leads to the other states following, and Abraham Lincoln kind of coming out of nowhere and getting the nomination. The Republican Party in 1860 is a little bit different than the one in 1856. In 1856, the only thing that really held this party together was the fact that they were against the extension of slavery. But in 1860, they're going to cobble together a platform which is really not so much just an against thing, but it actually is going to be a vision. They are going to appeal to free soilers. They're going to be against the extension of slavery into the territories, but they're also going to pull a reversal on the American Party. The American Party back in 1856 had been anti-immigrant. The Republican Party says, well, wait a minute, these people are a large portion of the electorate now. So they're going to pledge to protect immigrant rights. Thirdly, they are going to have this vision of populating the West with free farmers. And how do you populate the West with free farmers? You give away land for free. This is a reversal of policy. The main way that we used to give... In 1856, the Republicans now have a vision of populating the West with people who will be free yeoman farmers. Instead of purchasing land, as we had done all the way up until this time, it would become government policy to, in effect, give land away for free. Now, I want you to look at that. There's a secondary thing in that policy. If you're giving away land for free, what's your stand on American Indians? Is this, well, then let me rephrase it again. Is this a pro-American Indian policy or an anti-American Indian policy? Yeah. The Republicans, yes, they were trying to populate, yes, they are trying to spread free soil. But in order to do this, it means moving people out of the way. A continuance of that idea. Yes?
Were most of the Americans pro or against American Indians?
This would be a popular stand.
Okay.
It was really very much the minority which would believe that American Indian rights should be protected over an American farmer wanting land. Does that make sense? To get the old Whigs into their party, this party is going to favor increasing the tariff. And then finally, this party is going to actually build that railroad to the Pacific. Now, I call this unit the causes and the results of the American Civil War. But what I'd like you to look at right now is that platform. And after this unit, in Unit 6, we're going to be talking about the aftermath, the rest of the century, going from the 1870s into 1900. You look at that list right there. That is the stuff that is going to get done in that period. This is basically saying this is the plan. And since the Republicans are going to be in power basically all the way from the Civil War to 1900 and beyond a little bit, they are going to implement that. As the election approaches, Southerners start to claim that they do not believe that Abraham Lincoln is simply against the extension of slavery into the territories. They believe that he will try and end slavery where it already exists. In effect, they are declaring Lincoln to be an abolitionist. Lincoln had never really ever said that was what he intended to do. But interestingly enough, when these attacks are made, Lincoln does nothing to fight them. He doesn't put out any sort of statement, no, 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 that's not what I believe. He just allowed people to keep saying them. Lincoln will win with less than 40% of the popular vote. That's a little misleading because he's not even on the ballot in 10 southern states. Meaning that in 10 southern states he got approximately 0% of the popular vote. Now usually I would say that one of the reasons why Lincoln is going to win here is because of third parties. My usual third party rule is that third parties can make it so that somebody loses, help somebody win. That is not the case in this election. I want you all to pretend that John C. Breckinridge, Stephen Douglas, and John Bell were one person. Some guy named Douglas Breckinridge Bell. And pretend that Douglas Breckinridge Bell got every vote that Douglas Breckinridge and Bell got. And Abraham Lincoln only got the votes that Abraham Lincoln got. Douglas Breckinridge Bell gets over 60% of the vote and loses. Abraham Lincoln would still win this election. Why? Because he won the right states by a majority. As it stood, he won all but 3 of the electoral votes of the free states. If it had been one candidate, he would not have gotten that many. He would have lost California, he would have lost New Jersey, he would have lost Oregon. But he still would have won this election in the Electoral College. He won the North. The North had the majority of the electoral votes, and he won the North hands down. In other words, he became president without the South's permission. He became president without anybody in 10 states voting for him. And the fact that he could become president without any Southerners' permission makes them mad. And so, in reaction to simply Abraham Lincoln winning the election, South Carolina does what it has been threatening to do since 1833. Since 1833, South Carolina had been saying, if you don't do it my way, I'm not going to play United States. I'm going to leave. I'm going to secede. Well, they didn't do it their way. And so, South Carolina passes what is known as the Declaration of Causes of Secession. It claims that the North had violated the Constitution. You might want to substitute the word compact. the North violated the compact, the Constitution, by not enforcing the Fugitive Slave Clause, that part of the Constitution that said if property were to go to another state, that it is that state's responsibility to send that property back. That is the Fugitive Slave Clause. And if you're a northern state and you passed a personal liberty law, you violated that compact. And so therefore, under the theory of states' rights, under the theory that if someone violates the contract, if someone violates the compact, that you have the right to leave that compact, South Carolina secedes from the Union. And so in case this is not clear to you, I want you to put into this context. I want you to connect this Declaration of Causes of Secession with the ideas of the Virginia-Kentucky resolutions, with the ideas of the South Carolina exposition. What basically is the thing that connects all three of these things? Okay, so write that down. Connect those things. And if you're having any trouble figuring out how this is states' rights, your answer, okay, lies in the connection of these things. Finish that sentence you're writing. I want you to turn to your White House, and if you didn't get it, see if your neighbor got it.
But like states wishes override federal decisions. I forget specifically what I think so much. I never think about it. I can't get I'm too tired to like try.
So your nutrition is like
I mean, it's kind of basic, but I want you to make
Every time
everything
you kind of mess up. Like 6 all the
You're basically right. You're basically right. But there's a word. States' rights is one of the terms. Emancipation is another one of the terms. But it's all based in theory.
Pretty
The theory that is kind of the basis of all of these.
All the parties that are about this states not
All right, so let's bring it on together. Okay. So Who thinks they can tie these things together? Who thinks, I got this? I got this, kid. I got it. I got it. I understand. I see what you're saying here. I understand what you're saying. No one understands what I'm saying.
I have a
Failed.
question.
Yeah.
The Virginia and Kentucky resolutions were about farmers in states' rights, right? So
It wasn't so much about farmers, but it did have something to do with states' rights. Did have something to do with states' rights. Okay, well, what was the, do you remember what the Virginia and Kentucky resolutions were?
No, I just know they emphasize states' rights.
They are for states' rights. No, does anyone remember the basis of this? Yeah.
Isn't this when Jefferson and I think, was it not Madison?
Yes, ma'am.
It was Madison.
Yeah.
They were, I don't know. I just know it was them too, and they were mad at something that the government did, and they wanted to limit their power, so they went to Kentucky and Virginia, which were like their home states, and they made them write them.
Yes, that is true. And limited power of the federal government is a very important point here. Okay? Izzy, yeah.
States being able to like say the laws that the government made, something like that. Am I on the right track?
Yeah, that's exactly on the right track, because that's what happens in the Virginia and Kentucky resolutions. It's what happens in the South Carolina exposition. Chris, yeah.
It was like the whole issue of nullification.
Nullification is a step here.
So like the Virginia and Kentucky said that they could nullify the law, the federal law in their states because of states' rights.
States' rights, nullification.
And Southern, like South Carolina did that through the tariff.
And South Carolina did that for the tariff, and it's all. But you remember the underlying theory that said that you had the right to do this. Yeah.
Was it if they thought that something was unconstitutional?
Absolutely. But why? Yeah.
But it was a compact of sovereign states, and one if they just one or the other is not constitutional.
That the Constitution is a compact of sovereign states. And if something happens to violate that sovereignty, you have either A, the right to nullify it, but in this case, it wasn't a nullification because it's an election. So you also have the right to do what? To secede. So states' rights, think of it as state sovereignty. That as a sovereign place, if they do something to violate the deal, you get to exercise your walking papers. Compact theory. So this is how it looked as far as electoral votes. This map also shows the electoral vote, but what is good about it, it's hard to see, but it shows the percentage of the popular vote. Lincoln would not have taken these if he had been running against one candidate. But he would have taken this one, 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 and this one. Okay? More than enough electoral votes to win. Because he was winning a majority in places like New York and Pennsylvania. Ohio. Starts a trend, by the way. Republicans will never win the presidency unless they win Ohio.
Is that still true today?
That's still true.
Wait,
Republicans have never won the presidency without winning Ohio.
Do they know this?
Why do you think it's a battleground state every year? This is a vote by county. It's hard to see, but look, this is all for Lincoln. Lincoln County after Lincoln County after Lincoln County. And so now finally, thanks. When South Carolina secedes, and several other states start to look like they were about to follow. A senator from Kentucky, ironically the same guy, he's the guy who takes over for Henry Clay in the Senate when Henry Clay dies. A guy by the name of James Crittenden is going to propose a compromise. The proposed Crittenden Compromise had three parts. The first part would be a constitutional protection to slavery where it already exists. Ironically, this is the original 13th Amendment. Had it been ratified, it would have been the 13th Amendment. Why is it ironic that this would have been the 13th Amendment? Yeah.
13th Amendment abolishes slavery.
Yeah, 13th Amendment, their current one, abolishes slavery. The proposed 13th Amendment protected it. The second part of the compromise is basically reinstating the 3630 line. Basically saying that any territory north of 3630, all of this, would be forever closed to slavery. And then finally, all territories below 3630, popular sovereignty would be used. So you gotta see that the nation is falling apart. States are voting to leave the Union. Many of the states that had left the Union already were meeting in a hotel across from the Capitol. And they're basically coming up with this compromise, this proposed deal with James Crittenden. Abraham Lincoln is not even president yet. He is President-elect Lincoln. They cobble together this compromise. They bring it to Abraham Lincoln and ask him, does he support it? We actually have a tiny little handwritten no. A little more than that.
Oh, okay.
It's close though. He says, do not dally with pop sov of any sort. What's pop sov?
Popular sovereignty.
Yeah. So in other words, what does popular sovereignty allow? The possibility of what? And what had he run on? What had been one of his Republican campaign promise number one? We are against the extension of slavery into the territories. He basically says you can't do it. We ran on not doing this, so we can't do it. He goes on to explain that A, it allowed slavery into the territories, but B, it set up Southern Manifest Destiny. It basically made it so that Southerners, if they can't have anything north of 3630, what are they going to do? Cuba! Nicaragua! He knew, based on what had already been, the Pierce administration had wanted. Cuba. Also, during the Pierce administration, they had supported actions to try and take Nicaragua. If we said, okay, to 3630, anything below 3630 was now open to slavery. And it practically encourages you to get more if you can't have anything above. Do not dally with pop sov of any sort. Okay, since I'm running out of time, let me just kind of look at this. Let's just kind of say this one out loud. If Lincoln had said yes, do you think this would have solved everything? I mean, who says no and why? What?
This conflict is already too high. It's kind of the same situation as the compromise of 1850. No one would be happy even if, they said they were.
Yeah. Perhaps most temporarily. But I don't think it would have fixed it. The compromise does not pass, so therefore it fails to, bless you. It fails to prevent secession.
Well, you said they were meeting in a hotel across the street. Was that because they weren't allowed inside anymore?
They didn't want to be inside anymore because
Oh.
they had seceded,
Okay.
if that makes sense.
Yeah.
They were, we left. We'll make a deal, but you got to bring us back. Does that make sense? It's part of their power. By February 1861, most of the Deep South had voted to secede. There was a little less fervor for it in the Upper South. Places that are kind of touching the North, they were a little less into it. This made up 8 states, okay, that were not into it yet. These Deep South states are going to form the Confederate States of America right after Lincoln rejects the Crittenden Compromise. He says no, they form what they claim to be a country. They select a former Mississippi senator by the name of Jefferson Davis and also Zachary Taylor's son-in-law to be president. They will demand, okay, that the United States recognize their permanent independence and their right to be just let alone. They interviewed a Southern soldier after the Civil War, and they asked him, why did you fight so vigorously on behalf of the South? And he said, y'all came down here. Y'all came down here. James Buchanan will declare secession to be illegal. But then he will say he does not have the legal authority to stop it. Illegal, but I can do nothing. In effect, James Buchanan, as President of the United States, is standing on the banks of the Potomac. Bye. You know, that's wrong. You really shouldn't bye. Florida. Bye. Presidential historians have a tendency to like lists. They like to line up all the presidents in order of their effectiveness. Ranking number last, below a dead William Henry Harrison, James Buchanan. It depends. Republican-leaning ones always say Lincoln. Democratic-leaning ones usually say FDR. Lincoln takes the oath of office on March 4th, 1861. He is going to close his inauguration speech. I am loath to close. We are not enemies, but friends. We must not be enemies. Though passion may have strained, it must not break our bonds of affection. The mystic cords of memory stretching from every battlefield grave to every patriot, to every living heart and heartstone across this broad land, will yet swell in the chorus of the Union, when again touched, as surely they will be, by the better angels of our nature. And so Abraham Lincoln is saying, come on guys, it doesn't have to be this way. But he ain't no James Buchanan. Whereas James Buchanan said, it's illegal for you to leave, but I can do nothing about it. Abraham Lincoln says, secession is illegal and I will enforce the law. It's my job. So in closing today, we begin the war. Lincoln declared he would hold, occupy, and possess all federal property in the South. He means something very specific here. The United States Army owns all forts, all bases, all naval bases, everything. All of that is federal property. Now, for the most part, this isn't really true. For the most part, Southern forts had Southern commanders, and Southern commanders basically said, I'm seceding along with my state. They lowered the United States flag, they raised a state flag, later a Confederate flag, and they seceded too. But there were 8 places in the South where the commanders took their oath to the United States Constitution seriously. 8 places. Now, some of them are kind of not important, tiny little islands off the coast of Florida. Nobody cared about them. But there were 2 that will then be unified into 1, right in the heart of the secession. In Charleston Bay in South Carolina was a fort that still flew the American flag, Fort Sumter. Lincoln is basically saying, I'm keeping Sumter. Take that. That is what he was stating in his inauguration speech. Now, he thought he'd be able to mull this over for a while, come up with a plan, maybe. But no sooner does he take office than he is told that Fort Sumter is running out of supplies. And that if they do not get supplies soon, they will just simply have to give up and leave. Now, you just made a point of it. You just said, bah, 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 and now, all of a sudden, bah, 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 bah. So Lincoln decides, I got to do something. I can't do nothing. But do I want to be provocative? Do I want to start the war? He says he claimed that he wasn't trying to. What he's going to do is send an unarmed supply ship. Look, it's got no guns. But obviously, what is your intent if you're sending the supply ship?
To get attacked.
It wasn't necessarily to get attacked, but what were you saying by sending the ship? What are you saying about that fort? It's mine. And if I'm saying it's mine, what am I saying? It's not yours. And if it's not yours and it's in the middle of your harbor, what am I saying to you? South Carolina took this as a provocative move by the Union and fires upon Fort Sumter on April 12th, 1861. This is the beginning of the American Civil War. The fort holds out for about 3 days, and on, interestingly enough, April 15th, they surrender. The Ides of April. Lincoln will then call for 75,000 men to be brought up from the state militias into federal service to put down the insurrection. We have ourselves a civil war. when next we meet. Civil War in a day. If you're dividing up your studying, causes and results are the most important things. The war itself, battles and stuff, less important. Okay? Social change like ending slavery, very important.
Can you go back like this a lot?
Yeah.